We're going to share a little bit about CAAAV's history, about our different programs, and we work with a lot of supporters, and by that I mean people who contribute to the work in different ways. There are people who volunteer. We just came back from door knocking, that's why we were late. And there are volunteers there with us. There's people who work on fundraising, so there's lots of different ways to support the organization. So CAAAV was founded in 1986, and in 1986, I'm sure you all are familiar and have varying amounts of study and affinity with this. There's lots of Asian American organizing. Asian American identity is something that's beautifully brewing up at this time. And CAAAV was originally the Coalition Against Asian American Violence, and it was founded by Asian American women in response to physical violence and racial violence towards Asian Americans. We can go to the next slide. So two of the events that were really important in the US that catalyzed this were the terrorization and murder of Michael Griffith in 1986, and also the murder of Vincent Chin earlier in 82. CAAAV is a Pan-Asian organization, but that also means that we work in solidarity with other communities. So this is something that not CAAAV developed, but is developed from the School of Unity and Liberation, Tools for Radical Democracy, and Fierce, a couple different resources. Community organizing is a little different from activism, it's different from advocacy, it's different from direct service. So if I'm somebody who I'm a construction worker and my employer has stolen my wages, meaning they've promised to pay me and they haven't paid me, if I go to a food bank, I get immediate assistance with something I need to survive, right? Food. If I go to legal aid, they might assist me with legal advocacy. If I go to a community, a grassroots organizing organization, then the role that they have and the interaction that I have with them is a little bit different, because the goal is for me to work with people who have common problems. We work collectively to find common solutions, and really importantly in this definition is that we build power. So in grassroots organizing, we're building up the power of people who are directly impacted, and they also are making decisions about how do we run these campaigns, what demands do we have, visioning together what we want the world or our community to look like. So with building people power, this number one, we would actually call that base building. So rather than just outreach, like reaching out to someone, we're building up the base from people who are just in an area to people who are aware of the issues and who are politicized more and more. We develop the leadership of people who are directly impacted and raise their broader political consciousness. So with CAAAV, we do a lot of work with housing, but we also want our members to make connections between different systems of oppression. We exercise power through campaign development and decision making. So we form building-based campaigns, neighborhood-based campaigns, city, state, national ones. CAAAV usually works within the city. We work on building up the organization and its capacity, and we contribute to building up the movement.
So there are 3 ways you can support us as a volunteer. Emily and I work in the Chinatown Tenants Union, and so we do tenant organizing of rent-stabilized tenants in Chinatown. And the ways you can volunteer with us is I start volunteering at the monthly meetings. So the Chinatown Tenants Union, we have meetings every month, and everyone in the membership is invited, and we do reports and updates on like current events, and then also trainings during the meetings, which are usually led by our tenant leaders, which goes back to that point about like leadership development within the base. And then we also have a legal clinic after those monthly meetings that volunteers help like really coordinate and do like interpretation. And then we also have outreach on Mondays and Thursdays. For the summertime, we're trying to do more public space outreach on Mondays, and then on Thursdays we do door knocking to see, we identify certain buildings that might be at risk of evictions, or we know that there might be bad conditions. So we go and try to give people tenants' rights materials and also to see if we can organize them. Yeah.
Lena, do you think you could talk about NYCHA?
Yeah, so I'm one of the NYCHA organizing project organizers. So I organize in public housing in Western Queens. And so how many of us live in Queens? Oh, Greg. Sorry. So I think, so in Western Queens and also all across the borough, there are a lot of public housing complexes, and one of the biggest, I think on the entire East Coast, is a public housing development called Queensbridge. And so 5 years ago, the NYCHA organizing project organizers, who wasn't me, started door knocking and building out essentially an Asian tenants union in Korean, Chinese, and Bangla. And so the reason why CAAAV started to do that is to build a lot more concerted efforts of pan-Asian solidarity. In public housing, a lot of issues are a little different from the organizing that happens in Chinatown. Gentrification maybe doesn't look like your landlord trying to push you out through harassment, but maybe it looks like Amazon wanting to move to Western Queens, or maybe it looks like Long Island City becoming a tech hub, as well as where Ravenswood houses and Queensbridge houses is. And so what that looks like is that land on Queensbridge and Ravenswood becomes a lot more valuable, but it's public land. And so the idea is that the government is starting to develop policies to change that, to turn it into private land through experimental policies and things like that. And so a lot of the work at NYCHA is around building out the space of Pan-Asian tenants in coalition with Black and Latino tenants and tenants unions, as well as a lot of political education around these policies, around what gentrification looks like in public housing. And similarly, we have monthly meetings at Queensbridge, which is offline, and also he is a volunteer with us. Yay. And we also have outreach in various Western Queens public housing buildings on Monday nights and Wednesday nights and Saturday mornings, as well as our meetings, which are every second Tuesday of the month in the evening. And so if you have a language capacity of any kind, please reach out. We definitely need as many folks as possible. Volunteers in the past have said that it is very much like talking to family members who live in public housing. People have said that they're really able to develop their language skills and also just support a movement that should be led by low-income tenants. Yeah.
And lastly, the fundraising committee is a really awesome group of people who are also volunteers, and they run a grassroots fundraising campaign every fall, and they also do a lot of event planning. It's really fun. Yeah, so if you have any in-kind skills, you'd rather not donate, but you're really good at graphic design, or you love event planning spreadsheets, this is something that you could do too. We can go to the next slide. We're just sharing some photos. Some of the things are recent. There's something called the Rent Guidelines Board, which is a city committee of 9 people, 2 landlord representatives, 2 tenant representatives, and 5 public members. These 9 people vote on the rent increase for rent stabilized and certain rent stabilized apartments and 2 other types of rent regulated dwellings. And so every year this is a really important event for Chinatown Tenants Union members. We work with a city coalition, and they vote on the rent increase. We were in the Times. This picture over here is a photo of our monthly meeting. It's in our office. So this is what Em was saying earlier. People report back about what's going on in their apartment, in their buildings, any issues they're seeing in Chinatown. We do trainings on different tenants' rights or prevalent issue. We do issue ID together and power analysis. This is Ms. Chen from 135 Eldridge at the bottom. She's at the State Senate Housing Committee hearing testifying about the state rent laws that were just renewed this past June. The farthest photo is CAAAV marching with almost 2,000 other tenants from the whole state in Albany in mid-May, also regarding the state rent law campaign. This is some information that's slightly out of date. It's from 2013. We'll leave this here for a bit for everyone to read. Are folks familiar with what rent regulated means? Rent regulation means that there are some laws that regulate things like rent and other things about that type of dwelling. So a lot of people, most people in New York City are market rate, which means you have a lot fewer rights. So my landlord at market rate, my landlord could choose not to renew my lease next year. If your rent's stabilized, there are laws that require your landlord to give you the option to renew your lease a certain amount of time before your old lease expires, for example.
So a lot of this work happened when I was not with CAAAV, but I think you can see like Jesse on the bottom left. He was an organizer at CAAAV when they first started, and I think above it is Roxy. So the two of them, as well as I think Shahana and Naved and other organizers who worked at CAAAV, did a long process of base building, which, as Emily said, is door knocking and gathering people together with a common problem. And they found that the common problem really came down to language access. And so I believe there was a report about the numbers of a lack of access, and the idea is that this report can be used to push for and fight for different policies that will allow people who maybe don't speak English as their first language to have access to language interpretation for when they need repairs or for when they need help. And so that was a few years ago, but most recently the tenants at Queensbridge worked on building this campaign, Neighbors Beyond Amazon, which is basically saying no to Amazon HQ2 in Long Island City, and that was a victory. And so a lot of the tenants, specifically the Bengali tenants, because at the time there was no Chinese organizer, they went, to Albany. They testified, and they had decided on their own that they were going to stand against as neighbors against Amazon. And now it's the campaign has turned into a conversation about what economic democracy looks like.
And the fundraising committee again works on a grassroots fundraising campaign. We call it People Powered 15 or whatever our goal number is challenge. And people also, if you're not on the fundraising committee but you're interested in fundraising, you can be a people mover where you ask 10 friends to donate $15. And we try to raise a certain amount of money within 10 days. Okay, so if you're interested in volunteering, this is my contact. Contact me for any, for the public housing organizing, for Chinatown, as well as the fundraising committee, and I'll direct you to the other organizers. Thank you all.
Thank you. It was really nice to close the evening with this information. So Just a big thank you again to all of our performers tonight for just being so willing to share your stories with us in this space. We know that the personal is political and that creative projects write people into history. So hopefully WOW can become another home for you as we continue to share more stories with one another. So just want to give a big round of applause to everyone who performed tonight. So feel free to stay around, hang out, and mingle. There are sponge cakes over there if you want. And don't forget to donate. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.